Let's say we do teal. You don't need very much of this because of what we're going to do. Then we've got light blue. Just a little bit. And let's see, what goes good with light blue, teal, and let's say, how about some kiwi? You want just enough paint to be like about not quite a dime full. You want a little bit less than that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your spray water bottle and you're going to spritz just those colors. Give it a couple of pumps of water because you want to thin out this paint. See how it starts to fill up the dish? Let's take the fish. Blue colors and all that. That's nice fishy colors, isn't it? So now what you're going to do is you're going to take a kind of a small paintbrush, just a regular paintbrush. First off, stir up your paint so it's all well mixed into the water. You want it so it drips. You want it to drip right off your brush onto the clay. All right, throw that toothpick away. Get your brush wet. You're going to dip your brush into the paint and you're just going to dab it. Wow, that's pretty intense. I think we need to add a little more water. And just kind of do splotches all over the fish. You don't want to paint it solid with this color. You just want to paint splotches all over. In fact, it might even help if you spray your fish down and get it a little bit wet so the paint smears easy. Now, if you want to, you can paint the fins all one color. Okay, so we've got those colors. Now we're going to go with some light blue. A little bit of light blue here. And it's okay if you get it on the other paint because it's just going to all blend together like a tie-dyed t-shirt. Okay, a little rinse. Now we're going to go to the kiwi. You see how it's all spreading and mixing. Let it get into all those little nooks and crannies. And now I think we'll paint the main part of the fish's head. I guess that's what you call this part. We're going to do that all in kiwi. Of course, you can mix it all up and have a multicolored fish all over the place. Doesn't matter, whatever you like. But just make sure that you fill all the nooks and crannies with color. Okay. Now what you want to do is you want to go and do the sides. And don't forget your pins are basically teal. So do the sides here. Oops, I better move that shoe or it's going to get paint spattered on it. I learned how to do this by watching children paint because they didn't care about rules. We were painting fishes and all kinds of other ornaments, and they put too much water on their brush and too much water in the paint. And so it was just spreading every time they touched it to the clay. And it was just magical what it did when we went to dry brush it. Now it's looking pretty good, just the way it is right here, isn't it? And we're not even done yet. We haven't even made the magic happen. Now, what color do you suppose we should make his face? A little bit of blue with the teal in it, maybe? That's kind of pretty. We got both the blue and the teal. Oh, yeah, I like that. Little mix of both. That's quite nice. Now we'll take a little bit bigger paintbrush, the one we did the pink. So let's make sure we've got all the pink out of it. I think that'll work. And we're going to just go ahead and brush the back with all the colors. Now it looks like we have just about all that color in. Okay. Now what we want to do, oops, looks like we got some white spaces. Just little dabs here and there. Okay, now you let it dry, and then we'll do some dry brushing, and that's when the magic will happen. Remember, put your paintbrush, when you're done with it, back in the water. Now we can do the same thing to the snowman. Why don't we give the snowman the same kind of color since we've got so much paint left? So I'm going to take a little bit of and a little bit of kiwi. See how those colors, when they're really wet, just kind of blend? Those kids really showed me the magic when I watched them painting. I was just going to teach them how to dry brush the old-fashioned way. Okay. Can you see those colors? Don't they look beautiful? All right. And let's see. Rinse the brush a bit because I want the trim on the hat and the sweater to be just a light baby blue. Now make sure you remember to get your sides so it wraps all the way around. Now, since we've got so much of this turquoise blue, I'm going to go ahead and paint the back with that. Don't want to waste paint if we don't have to. See how runny it is, how drippy? Ordinarily, your paint would not be this thin when you're painting all over. Now we are going to squirt some more baby blue out, but I'm going to wipe out the thing because we want full strength baby blue for what we're about to do next. Okay, rinse that now. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to wipe out that little bit of paint that was the baby blue because it got contaminated with the other colors, which is fine. I did it on purpose. Because now we're going to be painting the snow on the snowman. And so we'll take our baby blue. Come here, baby blue. A little bit of paint in there because it'll probably take at least that much. But we need nice, clean baby blue. Okay. Now every part of the snowman that isn't clothing is going to be painted baby blue. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to dry brush that part of the snowman with some white paint so it looks like he's frosty and cold and snowy. And don't worry if you've gotten a little paint sloshed over from when you were doing all the real runny paint. Don't worry about that because now that you're painting with full strength paint, you can paint right over those little mistakes. Remember to get into all the nooks and crannies. See here, I had a nice long drip of green on the snowman part, on the snow part. That's okay. It gets covered up with the regular light blue paint. It's kind of like coloring. Just follow the lines. Make sure you get the sides. Okay. Now we'll set him aside so he can dry. Now while we're waiting for that to dry, see I put my brush back in the water. It's going to sit there for a while. And we're not going to dry brush him yet because the paint is too wet. But this one feels dry. So this one we are going to dry brush. And you'll see a little bit of magic. So we are going to use the metallic gold. Now remember, my gold is a little different than yours. It's a lot thicker. Whoa. And it just squirted out a little too much. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our pink dry brush that we used before. And see, it's pretty much dry, but the bristles are still flexible because the paint was practically dry when we set it to the side. Now we're going to take a little bit of gold. Now we're going to start dry brushing over all the detail. You want to go across the grain. You don't want to go with the grain, otherwise you might end up filling in the detail with too much paint. Now what you can do, you can go to Walmart and look at their metallic paints and see if there's any colors maybe you'd want besides the rose gold that I sent you and the glorious gold. Because this, although it's nice, it's not quite giving the effect that I want. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use a green emerald metallic because you need something to really make these colors pop because they're pretty intense. All right, so see how dark that is? You can really see it against the background. So let's try this again. And you can get any kind of metallic colors. They're not very expensive at Walmart. Should be less than $2 a bottle. But if you watch the video before you actually do the project, you have time to get some metallic paint if you want some. See what's happening to the fish? Those colors are starting to pop. And all the color that we painted on there is still showing through. So here we're going to go, same thing with the upper part of the fish. Now we're going to do the face. Do your edges. Get the detail. Okay, I think I got all the way around it. Now the last thing you're going to do, well, not the last thing, next to the last thing. First, clean your brush, your dry brush. Clean your dry brush. See how all that paint's still coming out? Just keep rubbing it until the paint doesn't show up anymore. Or get so light you can barely see it. Okay, set that aside. Now you want to find a real tiny brush. Super, super tiny. Because now you're going to paint in his eye. We just want to drop. That should be enough to do the fish eye and the snowman's eyes and smile. Doesn't take very much. You want to use the tiniest brush you have. And then just fill in the paint in his smile and in his eye. And then the next thing, the last thing you want to do on the snowman, these are the ones that have the sweaters that have noses and all of that. Because that's such a fine brush, I don't like to leave it sit in the water because it can deform the bristles. So this small brush, just rinse it really good, dry it off, and put it back. Or switch to another color. And our another color is the orange for the carrot nose. So we're going to do a little drop of orange. For the snowman's nose. There you go. I'm just going to show you a close-up of the fish. Now the next thing we're going to do for the fish is we are going to paint sparkles on the fish. And then the fish will be done and ready to be an ornament on your lovely tree. Don't worry if the paint gets all in the holes and looks white. It's going to dry clear. And we're going to paint the edges again. You'll probably go through quite a bit of your glitter paint. And we're going to need it for the snowman, so I'll go ahead and squirt some more. Doesn't that look pretty, even though it's still got the white cast to it till it dries, and it'll be clear. And that'll be one sharp looking fish. Okay, now do you remember how I showed you the broken polar bear? And when I told you you'd have to be very careful when you're handling these ornaments because they will break because they're quite fragile. But the thing I wanted to point out was, remember when we painted the pink shoe with the pink, the light pink, and the white? Well, I did the same thing to this half of the polar bear. I used dark blue, then light blue, and then white. And then I covered it all with the glitter paint. And that gave me this effect. It's the same thing as the pink shoe, only it was done with blue. Okay. Now the other thing, you notice the back half of the polar bear is white with sparkles. And all I did was, if you want to do just a plain white, simple ornament, no fuss, no muss, then take the porcelain ornament that has this type of design on it, and then just paint it with the glitter paint. That's all it is. There is no other paint on here or anything like that. Now, if you want to do that effect, that white effect, with one of the ornaments that was done in the raku clay, that's the kind of off-white, almost tan looking, all you'd have to do is paint that ornament completely white with regular white paint, and then once it dries, paint your glitter plane on it, and you get the same effect as just painting the porcelain. And now we're going to add some hangers to these ornaments. This is what you need your scissors for. Cut a piece of string. If you cut your string and the hole seems to be too small to go through, you can ream it out a little bit with the bead reamer, safety glasses, remember. Or a neat trick that I like to do, I stick it in some paint. Glue would work the same way, or the glitter paint, and what you're going to do is you dipped it in the paint and then just start twining it around, twisting it, making it nice and tight. And that paint's going to dry, and it's going to make that end very, very stiff, so that when you go to push it through that little hole, it should go through without any trouble. Let's try it. Little hole. And away we go. Now this is basically to give you an idea of how you can paint these ornaments. When we have our painting party, I'll be there and you can ask me questions about anything you have, Do you think this will look good or that'll look good? I'll tell you what, kids, your imagination is probably all you're going to need to make the most beautiful ornaments. And here we go. We have one pretty little pink shoe. Okay. One poor broken little polar bear, but he sure was a nice teaching tool. I'll put him aside. And then we've got our fish. Well, the fish has a bigger hole, so, and I think I want to hang him with the green hanger. So I'm going to cut the green ribbon. I feed it through the hole and then I tie a knot in the other end. And we have our fish. Our tie-dyed fish. Isn't that magical? Now it's going to take a while for this to finish drying so we can do the dry brushing on it. But what I'll do real quick is I'm going to take, I don't want to accidentally stick it in the wet paint, so I'm going to see, it's still pretty wet. You don't want it that wet when you're going to dry brush, especially because this is such a dark color. It would take over your whole, it might cover up all your design. All right, so here we go. You want to dry brush the trim on the sweater. And then, because we want the brush to be totally clean, we're going to save one dry brush for just white. Probably would like to dry brush white on quite a few things. Okay, so I'm going to take the small dry brush. Make sure I dip it in the white paint and not into the glitter paint. I'm dipping just the end of the dry brush into the white paint. I'm swirling it around. Now, if you notice these little particles that are getting in your way on your plate, that's just where the wet paint and the roughness of the dry brush has actually started to rub away at the paper of the paper plate. That's all that is. If you see it on your stuff, don't worry about it. Just take it. And so what we're trying to do here is dry brush the snowman's face. Oh, I should have waited till that black paint dried a little bit. So after I dry brush this, I may have to go back and touch up. Just dry brush. You can keep doing it a couple of times to build up the white color if you want to. Just let them dry in between each one that you do. Okay. Alrighty, let's see. It's like the orange tipped out, so let's redo the nose. Okay, rinse that real good. And now the black. Redo the eyes. Because when I dry brushed it, that black was still wet. And the dry brush just kind of grabbed it. Just a little touch up. And don't worry, if you mess up on something, start all over. Let it dry, paint it all one color or a new color or whatever you want to do. It's only paint. It can be painted over. So if you don't like how something turns out, now all this needs is the glitter paint and this will be done. So that's how to do those ornaments. And we'll talk more when we have our painting party. So this is basically what we did tonight. And hopefully you learned a little bit. And hopefully you won't be too bored watching the video so that you know what to expect when we have our painting party. Again, this has got to dry completely before we can put the glitter paint on it. But then it'll have a really nice sparkle. But didn't that sweater and hat turn out marvelous? I think so. Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you had fun.